My career in law started when I was 15 years old, and it was 1968. And I decided to, for the first time, become political. That year, it was a presidential election in the United States, and I spent my summer working for a candidate named Eugene McCarthy. It was a very volatile time in American politics. A lot of people were against the war in Vietnam, and Senator McCarthy had vowed to end that war. And so I was taking to the streets and arguing with middle-aged men about the war in Vietnam and whether we should be there or not. I was also meeting lawyers for the first time who wanted to change society, and I thought, oh, that's exactly what I want to do, so I want to be a lawyer. I decided that the summer of my 15th year, and I never turned back. I thought I would do law as a way to help change and improve society, but I didn't know how exactly I wanted to do that and which sorts of people I wanted to help. And that came about 11 years later. I have always been very respectful of other animals, of dogs and cats who I grew up with, but also of other animals, wildlife, and animals used in research labs. And once I got out of law school, I decided that I wanted to try to do volunteer work to help protect those animals better. And I met another attorney who was interested in that. His name is Larry Kesnick, and the two of us thought, well, if there are two of us who are interested in animal protection and rights, perhaps we can find more attorneys like this. So we put an ad in our local legal newspaper in San Francisco, and 6 people showed up, and we started meeting once a month to discuss the federal and California laws that relate to the protection of animals. And we taught ourselves about what the problems are and how we could apply the law to offer better protections to animals. So that's how I became a lawyer, and that's how we began to teach ourselves about the laws that relate to animal protection. That was in 1979. And at the time, I had a job with a small firm, and I was doing real estate, new development, and business contracts, and other business type of law. Well, in the 40 plus years since those early days when we were just meeting as a small volunteer group and teaching ourselves about the law as it relates to animals, we have since brought many, many cases. And as that saying from Field of Dreams goes, if you build it, they will come. And we've realized that many lawyers, not only in the United States, but all over the world, are interested in protecting animals. It's intellectually demanding because the law goes against us. The status quo goes against protecting animals in most instances. Most people think of the anti-cruelty laws and say, well, animals are fully protected, but that's not the case at all. For example, animals who are used to produce meat, dairy, and eggs have very little protection under the law. It's really quite fascinating. And over the years, we've brought many, many cases involving companion animals, animals in the wild animals who are in zoos and circuses, animals used in research labs, and a variety of other animals. But one case that stands out for me is the Woodley case. ALDF versus Woodley. ALDF is the Animal Legal Defense Fund, the group that I co-founded back in 1979. And Woodley is a couple. It was a couple. They're both dead now. Mr. and Mrs. Woodley raised dogs, and they had 500 dogs on a very small plot of land in Sanford, North Carolina, which is a small town in North Carolina. The dogs were in hellish conditions. They had broken bones, cancers, they had fleas, they had all sorts of infestations. They didn't get adequate food. They were treated very, very badly, very negligently. And that's because the Woodleys didn't have enough staff, or they didn't spend the time to properly treat these animals and to give them proper food and medical attention in the space that they needed. And local activists have tried for years to create better conditions for these animals, and it had failed. But what North Carolina has is a very interesting and unusual law. In addition to prosecutions by the county or the state for cruelty, a citizen in North Carolina can bring a civil lawsuit to enjoin, to get an injunction against cruelty. And so, and that law had not been used very much, so we decided we were going to try to use that law and see if we could save these dogs, get them out of harm's way. And so we did. We filed a lawsuit in late 2004. The case was brought to a preliminary injunction hearing in March of 2005. At the same time, the local DA brought charges of cruelty, and those two cases moved forward in tandem. And at the end of a 3-week trial, the Woodleys were convicted of cruelty, and they were enjoined from continuing to commit cruelty to these dogs. About a week after the judgment came out, we were allowed to go onto the property and take off all of the dogs, which was done in about 8 hours. The Woodleys then appealed the case up to the State Court of Appeals on the basis of standing, and the court granted us the law allowed for broad standing, and the court sided with us every step of the way. So we set good precedent in the state of North Carolina. We were able to go back in several other times after that and to get animals out of harm's way. And as for the hundreds of dogs who came out of the Woodley hellhole, we started a shelter, which is not something lawyers generally do, but we had no place else to put these dogs. The town animal control had 3 spaces, so we started a shelter in not an abandoned building, but a building that had been empty for 20 years. The owner of the building loaned it to us. PetSmart gave us kenneling and pallets of food, and the local veterinarians tirelessly worked to bring the dogs back to health. And people from the community came in and took care of the dogs for 12 hours a day, every day. We found foster homes for all of them, and ultimately they were all adopted out to new homes where they lived out the remainder of their lives in better conditions. So that's one of my favorite cases, because we were able to get the dogs out of harm's way in the law, but also to bring them back to health in person. And there were a lot of very cute dogs that we helped. Well, we started from really nothing. There were very few lawsuits that actually were brought on behalf of animals as subjects rather than as objects. Animals have always been the objects of the law. There have always been cases that have, delved into who owns the animal, other contractual issues. But we were bringing cases in a very different way, in a way that the legal field had not seen them before. We were bringing cases where we couldn't sue on behalf of animals because they are property, but we were suing to get better protections for them. And that started with our very earliest cases, which date back to around 1981. So we started bringing cases. We were litigators. We started bringing cases. Most of those cases in the early days dealt with wildlife. Those were the cases that were coming to us. But then we expanded and brought a series of cases against the U.S. Department of Agriculture to try to breathe life into the Federal Animal Welfare Act and protect animals who are used in research labs. We brought a wide variety of cases. And in bringing those cases, we decided that we needed to do more than simply litigate. We needed to teach about what animal law is. And so we began teaching in law schools as adjuncts. Today, the Center for Animal Law Studies at Lewis and Clark Law School, which is where I teach, offers 25 separate courses, all dealing with animal law, criminal animal law, international wildlife law. I teach industrial animal agriculture law. So 25 courses. You can check it out on our website, Center for Animal Law Studies. There are students who actually come to the Center for Animal Law Studies from many parts of the world, African students, students from Australia, New Zealand, Europe, South America, as well as American students, to take these courses and to study animal law. It's now become a separate field of the law. There are law reviews, there are books, there are teachers who are seeking tenured track, including our own Raj Reddy at Lewis and Clark. There is so much now that simply didn't exist in 1979. It is a field of the law. So we've taken something that was a blank slate and created a field of the law. It's very, very exciting and very challenging. Been a lawyer since 1978 when I passed the bar. And in 1981, I left the firm I was with and started working full-time for the Animal Defense Fund, the organization that I co-founded. And I retired from that job in 2019. I have taught as an adjunct professor since around 2011, and I've enjoyed teaching, but the transition to doing it full-time has been a lot more joyful than I thought it would be. I really enjoy working with students. I enjoy having more time to analyze the cases than I did when I was practicing. I had so many other things to do that I really didn't have the time to develop a syllabus and think through the best ways to teach. Until 2019, I hadn't really considered teaching as a full-time profession. And what it enables me to do at this, and I'm 70 years old now, and it enables me to influence students who are going to be the next generation of animal lawyers, and to teach them what's in my head, and then let them go out there and do wonderful things for animals. So I'm really very much enjoying teaching the students at Lewis and Clark Law School, as well as students from other law schools as well. I have always done lectures and visited with students in other law schools. My advice to lawyers who would like to practice animal law is that there are many, many resources available both online and in programs such as the ones that we do at Lewis and Clark Law School, where we teach JD students. We also have a program for LLM students, as well as a program for MSL students, students who are not lawyers, but are animal advocates. Learn as much as you can, and then decide what's most important to you to work on. You can't work on everything at once. It's simply not possible. There are too many problems that animals face. And so decide if you want to work on big cats or elephants or companion animals or what I prefer to work on, which is farmed animals. Decide what your real passion is, and then start working in that area. And as you start working, you'll learn more and more. There are many possible jobs nowadays with nonprofit agencies that work on animal protection, as well as working for a state government, either as a prosecutor or a defense attorney, or working for a large firm where you can do the pro bono work for animals. So if people are interested, they can contact me at my email address, jtischler at lclark, which is Lewis and Clark, .edu, or go to the Lewis and Clark website and check out the Center for Animal Law Studies. There's so much on our website that will help you become more familiar with what animal law is and what the options are to practice in this area.